This video covers the solution to the lab using cookies and sessions to implement a shopping cart, Part 2. In this solution, we will review adding purchase information, modifying products.php to analyze the contents of a cookie, and then testing the process. First of all, we will look at purchase.php. We move over to our file system tool, go to Suites Complete, and we look at purchase.php. The first thing we need to do is retrieve 3 parameters from the URL. For that reason, we will use $_get. The technique that we will use for all 3 is fairly simple. We will check to see if the parameter is set, and if it is, we will retrieve the parameter into a variable, but first we will perform filtering and sanitization by simply changing the data type. If the parameter contains malicious information, by forcing it to a data type of int, we automatically strip out any string information and we only retain digits. We then do the same thing for the other 2 parameters, quantity and price. The only difference is that price will be converted to float, which will have the same effect, but it will allow us to retain decimal information. Because we've already filtered and sanitized the information, the validation is going to be relatively simple. The only thing we need to check is to make sure that there is actually some value in each of these 3. Accordingly, we can simply do an if statement to check to see if ID and quantity and price. If those all come back as positive, that means we have some information which has followed the transformation into int or float. If any of these contain improper information, they will be converted to a value of 0, which will be interpolated as Boolean false. Accordingly, if they fail the test, we simply set a cookie called status to unset to indicate that one of these 3 values has not been set. We will deal with the cookie later when we make modifications to the products.php file. We also need to set the time to sometime in the future, in this case 3,600 seconds, and we set the path to the default, which is simply /. We can now pull in the products and represent it as a variable, and then perform add product to cart, supplying ID, quantity, and price. And if this fails for some reason, we know that we can set a cookie indicating some kind of a failure. Otherwise, we set a cookie indicating success. As you will recall, if we go back to products.php, the only reason why it would fail would be if the getDetailsById, which does a database lookup, returns a false value. So now we have 3 possibilities for status: success, failure, or unset. In any event, we now need to redirect to products.php. This can be accomplished through header manipulation by setting a header of location to suitescomplete/products.php and then exiting. Because we are exiting, we have no need of any other code within purchase. So the net effect will be purchase will receive 3 parameters. If everything is successful, add the product to the cart, set a cookie, and then redirect. It's now time to turn our attention to products.php. So we save the file, turn back to our file system, look for products.php, which is under Suites Complete. And the first thing we need to do then is to check the status of the cookie. Before we do that, of course, we need to make sure that the cookie is set in the first place. So if the cookie is not set, we simply assign a value to message equal to an empty string. We then check for the 3 possibilities: cookie status success, in which case we give our users a success message. If the cookie status is unset, we give them an appropriate indication, either ID, quantity, or price was not set. And finally, if none of the above, simply sorry, unable to add item to cart. We now need to find a place to display the message, which could be immediately after our links for greater than or less than. So if the message has something in it, we will put in 2 spaces and in bold the message followed by a break, otherwise nothing. So we save the file, and we then need to verify that we have a link to cart. That would be towards the top of the file where it says login our members and we have shopping cart. This should be linked to cart.php. Once we've verified that, make sure all of the files are saved, double check our work, and we're now ready to move to the browser and perform a test. So for now, we can simply type in purchase.php under Suites Complete, question mark, followed by the first parameter, in this case product ID equals 1. Make sure that you respect the case of what you told PHP to look for. We then put in an ampersand and the second parameter, in this case QTY for quantity, again equals 1 for this test, another ampersand, and then price equals some value, for example 1.11. We click enter. We then look for the message which should appear immediately after the links. We're looking for success or failure or unset. And then if we click on shopping cart, we should then see the contents of the shopping cart appear. So again, you can test it using different parameters just to see what happens. So again, we could say purchase, and then for example, let's say that we don't set the price. Then we should see a message coming back, sorry, either ID, quantity, or price was not set. And if we do the same thing again, and we set an improper value, for example, let's say a product ID of 99, which doesn't exist, then again, we should get a similar message. Again, we go to shopping cart, adding more products as we go along, and you will continue to see the extended price and the totals increase as well. And this concludes our review of the solution to the lab using cookies and sessions to implement a shopping cart, part 2.